All right, quantitative friends. So you've just finished the test, and I'm making a video right after that. So we're going to be jumping into our unit on statistics, and so there's going to be several short videos on a variety of topics. This is not going to be the first video that you're going to see, but it'll be one of the first videos that you're going to see. So I want to talk today briefly about standard deviation because it is an important part of statistics. So along with mean and median and mode, one of the other things that that people want to know is what's the standard deviation of a set of data. So let's talk quickly about the definition, and then let's see what that means kind of in real life a bit. So standard deviation is a number that is a measure of the amount of variation in a set of data. So it's a number, and it depends upon what the data is, what that kind of number is going to be, how big it's going to be. And so let's talk about a low standard deviation example. So let's say that we have a class, and in that class there are 10 girls, and 5 of the girls are 5'4", and 5 of the girls are 5 feet 5 inches tall. Okay, not a lot of difference in there, not a lot of variation, not a lot of dispersion, not a lot of spread of the data because they're all really close together, 5'4" or 5'5". A high standard deviation, and we'll talk about how to, what that number might be later. A high standard deviation example might be, well, we have a class again of 10 girls, and maybe 2 of the girls are 4'10", 3 of the girls are like 5'3", what's that, 5? 4 of the girls are 5'6", and 1 of the girls is 5'10". So you can see that there is a lot of spread or variation in the data. Small variation, small standard deviation. Large variation, large deviation. So it tells us, first of all, it tells us about the amount of spread or the amount of variation of some data. Here's what else it tells us. It tells us about being typical, or at least how far from typical it gets noticed. So let's say that there's a new basketball coach in Epping, and that coach wants to interview the potential girls on the basketball team one by one. He doesn't want to see them all, the coach doesn't want to see them all as a group. Just wants to meet them one-on-one and just get a chance to talk to them just for a couple minutes, just to get some sense about where they're at. So the first person to walk in the office is Hannah Armstrong. So Hannah walks in, and the coach just sees Hannah. Great, sit down, have a nice chat about basketball and so on, and everything's great. So off Hannah goes. Nothing remarkable in terms of Hannah's height. And the next person to walk in is Laura Doogie, and again, Laura walks in. Coach takes a quick look, and again, nothing remarkable there in terms of height. Sits down, has a nice conversation about basketball. Laura says, "I'd really rather be playing softball," but anyway, the conversation goes just fine, and off Laura goes. And the next person to walk in is Carissa. Coach immediately thinks, God, I hope this girl's quick and has great ball handling skills because she is not tall. So they have a nice conversation. Carissa, had this great conversation, and as it turns out, she is a very good ball handler. Both left hand and right hand, she's actually quite good. I don't understand how she wasn't playing basketball in the first place. And then the next person to walk in is Avalon Brown. And so Avalon walks in, and coach goes, oh, this is awesome. This girl is tall. So the question is, when is a girl considered typical in terms of height as a high school girl, and when is she not typical? So when Hannah and Laura walked in, the coach just kind of shrugged his shoulders. Nothing unusual here in terms of the height of these two girls, because they're pretty average. But when Carissa walked in, she's different. She's definitely shorter than the average girl, and it's pretty noticeable. And then when Avalon walked in, again, same kind of situation. She's definitely taller than the average girl. It's pretty noticeable. So the question is, when does it start to become noticeable? And that is the number that represents the standard deviation. So as it turns out, statistically speaking, the average high school girl is 5 feet 4 inches tall. And the standard deviation is SD equals 2 inches. So as that basketball coach is interviewing these basketball players, if a girl walks in who's 5'4", or 5'3", or 5'5", the coach just doesn't even notice. Yeah, that's a pretty average height girl. Nothing to see here. But once we start getting past 2 inches, maybe like 3 inches, girl walks in who's 5'7", or a girl walks in who's 5'1", now the coach notices, hey, that one's different than average, either taller or shorter than average. So the standard deviation tells us how far away from average do we need to be before things start to get different, before we start to notice that they're different. So again, going back to our low standard deviation class, if for whatever reason we were in a high school where all the girls, like, let's say there's 100 girls in the high school, 49 of them are 5'4", 49 of them are 5'5", and 2 of them are 5'7", those 2 would be considered extremely tall girls compared to the other ones because they're just way different than everybody else. And that was only 2 inches. But they would be considered to be extremely tall. So the measure here, standard deviation, tells us when do things start to look a little different than the average, than the typical. So standard deviation, how much variation is there? Or when do things start to be different than the mean or the average? There it is. There's your intuitive understanding of standard deviation. There'll be lots of calculations that we're going to do later, but that's all I have to say about standard deviation. Stay tuned for more videos.